little bit. The membership in the House and the Senate and how you think about your visits with them. And then we're gonna do some role play, because you have to practice talking to the members. So, or to their staff, you'll mostly be talking to the staff. So just to get a sense of our grounding, how many people here have never visited a lawmaker's office? Okay, 3, that's good. How many people have visited lawmakers' offices on lobby days? Okay, 2, all right. How many people routinely visit lawmakers' offices during session? Wow, that's a lot. And I'm gonna pick out some people I didn't hear. Folks in the back. Ever visited a lawmaker?
Yes.
Yes.
I worked for the legislature in Michigan.
Well, okay, that's a big one. Any other current or former staffers? Excellent, all right. I would love your input. Feel free to pop off with your opinions during the presentation if you feel like there's something that you just feel needs to be understood. All right. So, 140 days creates a unique boiling room of legislation. No other state that I'm aware of has the particular set of outside limits that we have here. There are other states with part-time legislatures. Here, 140 days, every other year, doing everything. Some states have a budget session and then a legislation or policy session and kind of go back and forth, but here we expect lawmakers to do everything in a very short period of time. Add to that they don't do much for the first month or so. There are many reasons for that, but mostly they're finding the bathroom and getting their staffs hired and, you know, getting to know where their seat on the floor is and all that stuff. So for example, this week, I believe they've already adjourned for the week, right?
Yeah.
So that makes the session calendar even more truncated. So I spend a lot of time focusing on this because the calendar in this state legislature drives everything. So on the handout that was in the back, the first page gives you the basic session calendar. Now, I counted these days myself, and I didn't check it against amendments to the rules. This is pretty standard, but I put tentative because at some point I'm gonna have to read every page of the damn rules to make sure that the days are counted correctly. Nonetheless, this is basically the framework that we're in. We're already in the beginning of February. Not a whole lot has happened. A lot of bills have already been filed. Something on the order of a couple of thousand, I think, already. Isn't that right, Scott?
Not quite.
Not quite. March 13th is the deadline for House bills to be filed. So between now and March 13th, which isn't that far away, all the bills will basically get filed. That doesn't mean that there aren't maneuvers that can add a bill late in session or amend something to another bill. All that stuff does happen.
Won't be ours.
It won't be ours. And fundamentally, most members play by this rule. They plan their bills to be filed and they are ready to step into the next phase by or before filing deadline. The next big deadline is the end of the committee period, which is all the way in May 11th. So committees can continue to meet and hear bills and report them out. However, if you notice, May 11, right after that is May 14, which is the last House calendar. Well, if you've got a bill that's still being heard in committee on May 11, it's basically dead already. So you have to think about this calendar as, okay, if the floor has to, hear your bill on or before the 14th of May, really it has to go through calendars, it has to go through your substantive committee. You better have it well on the way before that committee deadline. So we try and make sure that our bills, anything that we're working on, is in committee and being heard, ideally in March. Often it's in April. That's just the roll of the dice. But that is the sort of framework that we try and achieve, because at the end of the session, the clock is your enemy. Bills are dying every day because they're not far enough down the pipeline to pass. And a lot of times, you know, you won't get, there's not a lot of news about that. So there'll be a lot of controversy about a bill, but when you actually look at it, it'll turn out it was dead 3 weeks before. So it's really important to know that, keep your bill moving throughout the process. And so go to the next page. We're going to talk briefly about how we do that. So for the next 2 weeks, our goal is to educate the freshmen. That's the group who's never heard of this bill before, or this coalition, or TAG, or really anyone. And there's a lot of them. There's 25 freshmen in the House and 5 in the Senate. Those freshmen all vote. Some of them are on our 2 committees. So it's a goal of ours with this bill to have as many members as possible ultimately signing on to the bill as co-authors. So we're going to start with the freshmen because they need the most time. They need to be educated from the base. They've not heard of this before. They didn't go through it before. Then, during that next 2 weeks, we will get a bill number. When we have a bill number, we go back to all the members who were co-authors last time. Now, some of those members, as Scott said, have moved to the Senate, so that's great. To just remind them that they supported this before and hope they support it again and answer their questions. The rest of the co-authors will all need visits. Just because they signed their name onto something doesn't mean they actually remember it. There are thousands of bills every session. That's what they have staff for. So a lot of what happens, yes?
Are you aiming to have a bill in the House and the Senate
Yes.
and then eventually merge? That's better for the timing, to have 2 different.
We're gonna have a bill in the House and the Senate because it gives us the maximum opportunities to have one of them pass. So, if you have bills moving in both directions, it multiplies your opportunities.
And Senate bills are statistically more likely to pass than House bills, so you sort of lose an opportunity if you don't have both, and we can't, so.
Right, and the House and the Senate are in sort of a rivalry. So House members who really kind of staked their claim on a bill like this and really want it to be theirs and feel ownership over it, we're gonna get a little squirrely about subbing in the Senate version at some point. There is that rivalry, but in the end, everybody is trying to accomplish the same goal. So that'll be the end of February. Then in the beginning of March, our goal is to get our bill heard in committee, get it into committee, get it heard in committee, and get it out of committee. And we're going to talk about that in a little more detail in a moment. The committee process will be largely about rebuttal arguments. So we know why we like this bill. And we have some fact sheets we're going to use for the practice and then that you will take to do your real visits. And this is the time early on when we just tell people why we want this bill. Here's why we like it. The very next step, our opponents are going to say why they hate this bill. And the next time we visit the members, they're going to be a little more educated and they're going to have more questions. So the committee process and the moment when it's really kind of going to hearing in committee is when we are really focused on responding to the opposition. And they will have a lot of arguments. We've been through this before, so we feel pretty well prepared, but they will make some extraordinary claims involving a lot of dead people and various unsolved crimes. The final part of the process, and this is true on both sides, it's a little more regimented by rules in the House than it is in the Senate, where things are more loose. But the final part of the process is floor. If we have done our early session work right, when this bill goes to the floor, it already has enough co-authors to pass. People don't vote against their own bill. Or they have to be really convinced that they should vote against their own bill. So that process of getting early support pays off when you go to the floor. So we're really hoping to have a vote on the order of 120, 125 in favor in the House, and 19 or 20 in the Senate. Maybe more. So now we're going to talk about how we, as individual people, do that. The main thing that I try and carry with me into these visits is that the folks that I'm visiting with are not me. And that they might support this for a set of reasons that are different from my reasons. And that's just fine. So that first visit, you're going to be going to see these freshman members who've just now found the office and figured out where the cafeteria is. That first visit to their office, you're going to be talking to staff who are like, criminal justice, yeah, okay, I think that's so-and-so. And that person's going to be just starting to wrap their head around what this issue area is. Your goal is to listen, make your pitch, and we'll get to that. Listen, hear their concerns, write them down, and say, I'll get back to you about that. Every lobby visit is an opportunity for another lobby visit. This is about building relationships with human beings who have different motivations from our own. And so learning what experiences they've had, what thoughts and frameworks they apply, and then coming back the next time really able to kind of think and talk in that framework is the core exercise that we're going to practice. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. Scott actually answered the question about the Senate. There's a sheet in your handout highlighting what I think are the strengths that we have this session in the Senate, and essentially the priorities for our first round of Senate visits. We're going to visit everybody on the committee. The committee looks pretty good. We're also going to remind Lois Kolkhorst and hopefully bring her in as a potential floor leader, because she's new in the Senate, but she's, a great, strong woman who understands the issue and could really do great on this.
Perry and Creighton might also be on our co-authors list, I don't remember.
Creighton is, Perry is, I don't remember, I'd have to look. In the House, we have, well, we've actually talked about that. We'll go to the next thing. Okay. I want to do a quick review of the overview of the bill process so that you kind of get the terminology. A bill is filed. We know what that means. It appears in the world. That is the bill's first reading. When the clerk looks at the first bill, reads it into the record, that is first reading. The bill gets referred to committee, and then it's heard in committee, and we go through all that process. Goes back to the floor, and that's second reading. Second reading is where most of your floor activity happens. It's really important to remember this stuff, because when you look at the notes, and if you start watching the legislature, you'll see that there's a calendar every day with first reading bills, second reading bills, and third reading bills. Second reading means that you have your floor fight going. Third reading generally means that the bill is just subject to technical correction. That's not always what it means, but that's what it's supposed to mean. So you want to aim all your lobbying at your second reading floor vote. and then be sure and not leave or go away or think you've won already, and monitor your third reading vote. Yeah.
I'm a total noob. What is a reading?
It's literally, so imagine that this is the 19th century. There's a person who sits with a stack of paper in paper folders and opens it and reads it into the record.
Who's listening?
They don't read the entire bill anymore. I believe at one point, historically, the entire legislation was actually read into the record. But now they just read the bill number, the author, and the caption. So that's a reading. So when you see your calendar every day for the floor, it'll have a list of bills on first reading, especially early, because that's all they're doing is referring bills to committee. And then eventually there'll be first reading, second reading, and third reading.
Are there votes in between these readings? What happens?
After the first reading, it goes to committee. The second reading is the reading to set the members, to make the members aware that the bill has been laid out for a floor vote. So that is the floor vote reading. The third reading is also a floor vote reading. And there are a number of rules around how much monkey business you can have. You can actually lose your bill on a third reading. It's rare, but it happens. And then if it's a House bill, then it goes to the Senate after third reading. And the Senate works the same way.
Except they always suspend the rules and have the two readings on the same day.
Yes, right, that's true. The House is pretty meticulous about keeping to the calendar, in part because they have so many members and people just don't like monkey business. The Senate has very few members. They all sort of know each other and they work in a more loose-knit way. And so they will often suspend many rules, including the second and third reading on separate days rule, which I think is in the Constitution, that you have to read the bills on separate days. Okay, so I'm going to do one more thing on rules. House Resolution 4, H.R. 4, is the House rules. In the Senate, the rules are not so important because they suspend them routinely. So you just have to know who's voting for you, who supports you, and move your bill that way. In the House, there are a lot of rules, and there are points of order called on bills routinely because a rule was not followed. So first, we're going to make sure that our bill follows all the rules because we do not want a point of order. But in addition, there are moments where the rules give you opportunities. So for example, every bill has to have a set of addenda in the packet. There's a lot of stuff that has to be attached to a report at the end of the committee process for that bill to get to the floor. If you can assist in the process of creating some of those addenda or moving the information from where it is to where it needs to be, you've got some very busy, harassed, these jobs are mind-numbing for staff. They have so many bills to keep track of and so much information they're supposed to compile. And if the committee clerk puts a bill to the floor and it has a point of order because there's something missing from the bill packet, that does not make the committee clerk happy or popular. So there is a point at which you can be assisting without being annoying. It's a little bit of a dance. A bill can take a long time to get from its substantive committee after it's reported favorably between there and calendars, which, does everybody here know what calendars is? We hear a lot about it in the news during session. The black hole where bills go to die. The purpose of the calendars committee is to put bills on the floor calendar. It is an administrative function. The calendars committee chair gets to decide what bills go on the committee's agenda to then put on the floor. So your bill is out of committee, reported favorably, and somehow it hasn't arrived in calendars. there's sort of this black hole in this calendar where things can fall and never return. So part of our job is to keep things moving. So we will visit the committee clerk and see how that, bill packet is doing. We'll visit the calendars committee clerk and we'll see if our bill has arrived yet. We'll try and figure out why it hasn't. Sometimes you can't get the answers you're looking for, but sometimes you can. Sometimes something is just sitting on a person's desk in a giant pile because there's just too much to do and not enough people. All right. And finally, I'm going to make a quick pitch for lawyering without a license, unofficial. Bills and laws are in English. They're written to be understood by average people. That's the goal. The law is not something that's owned by lawyers. So part of what you learn dealing with lawmakers' offices and their staff is that mostly they are not lawyers. But their job is still to write the law. So hopefully that will give you all confidence when you walk in that, you don't need to know the last Fifth Circuit ruling on blah, blah, blah to be able to articulate a good case for what the state policy should be with respect to really anything. But in this case, warrants for your cell phone location data. So I've put a link in your presentation to the section of the code which we are amending. I know that it's paper. Hopefully I'll be able to send this around electronically so you can click on it. But you will see when you look at that it's just in English. You can read it. You can pretty much understand what warrants are required for already and how this location thing fits into that. One more thing that gets us ready for our practice, because I can tell people are getting tired. If anyone needs cards, they're in the back. I want to hand out the house seating chart. One of the things that we often forget is that there's an actual physical location, here, just go ahead and hand that around, where these members spend a whole lot of their time. They have a desk mate. They spend a lot of time talking to their desk mate. There's a lot of slow time. There's a lot of elaborate celebrations of Girl Scouts of America or, my hometown flower store that just had its 50th anniversary. And during that time, depending on what else they have going on, sometimes the members are just sitting at their desk chatting each other up. So it's actually important to know where they sit. So I've handed around a seating chart for the house, and I've circled the freshmen. Because as we said, we're going to start with the freshmen. That's going to be our kind of what comes out of this training, I hope. I've circled the freshmen. I've put a square around members who were floor heroes on this bill last time. And I've put a check mark at the seating arrangement if the other member sitting with them was a supporter last time. So we find out that Pena, who's a freshman and new, is sitting with Deshotel, who supported the bill last year. So if we actually, as part of our freshman lobby strategy, go visit Deshotel, his office, remind his staff that he supported this last year, make sure that they remember the bill, provide the handout, provide your name and contact information. They can pull the bill packet from last year. Kind of get him aware, again, that we're back. Then you can go visit Pena, start the conversation with that new member. And ideally, in this early part of session, when they're just spending a lot of time sitting at their desk, it would be great if they struck up a conversation between each other. The House floor, yes,
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on the icons. In other words, the check mark you said shows that the other member sitting next to them
was a
wasn't
supporter last year, yeah.
but they're circled as freshmen.
The circle is the freshman and their desk mate, they're in twos.
Right, well, up at the top, they're about the middle, you right, we have Faircloth and
Yes.
Gutierrez.
Yes, Faircloth is the freshman, Gutierrez is a senior member who was a supporter last year.
So a check mark means they were a supporter last year.
Yes.
Okay.
So as you can see, a lot of freshmen end up sitting together. That's pretty common, they put the freshmen as seatmates. So that just means we talk to both freshmen just like we plan to anyway. But I made this in particular because it's a reminder to all of us. We all show up from whatever history we have, thinking Republicans and Democrats. We show up thinking Houston or Abilene, but very quickly there becomes an entire social culture that is the House social culture. And in many respects, as the session goes on, this becomes the most important social culture because it's the everyday experience of the members. So keep this. We're going to use it to make assignments for our first round of visits after the training. And let's go to role play. Does anyone have any questions about rules and calendar and all that boring stuff?
Does it have, may I ask, does it have to be read 3 times before it actually goes to a vote?
No, it has to be a reading. It's very weird terminology.
I feel a little green asking the question, but I'm not totally clear.
It's okay. Like I say, this terminology is so ubiquitous that it's good to learn what it means now, or you spend a lot of time being confused about where your bill is. First reading, the bill has just been filed, the clerk reads it into the record, and it gets referred to committee. That's all that
By reading, they
happens.
just read the bill number by so-and-so and the caption.
And the caption.
And they bang the gavel and it's referred to the committee. So
Right.
just boom, boom, boom. And in fact,
And-
you'll hear them referring dozens of bills at a time in like an auctioneer's rapid
Yes.
voice.
It's
Um,
quite a
just to
fine
roll
art
through
to roll through the new filed bills. So that's first reading. Second reading, they read the caption, the bill number, and then it's put on the floor.
And that's after it's been to committee.
Most don't even get to that phase.
That's right, that's right. Most bills,
Yeah.
well, most bills don't get out of committee. I mean, like
Okay.
7,000
That's
that are
true.
filed.
You're right.
So,
Yes.
first reading, it's assigned to committee. The committee hears it. If the committee approves it, it goes to calendars. If calendars approves
Puts it on a calendar.
then
It gets a second
It gets a
reading.
second reading, and the second reading is the floor bill.
Is the floor vote?
Yes.
So
So
what
when
is that
somebody
third
says
reading?
third reading in the House only, the rules require bills to be read on separate days. So the following day after the vote, the bill is brought to the calendar again as a third reading bill. And this time, unless somebody has a technical correction, typically it's just, read.
They have to have a
and voted.
supermajority to amend it on third reading. I forget if it's 80% or something.
So
It's
even
high.
if you need the majority vote in the House on that third reading, it's not.
It is not done
anything to
until it's
celebrate
done.
Until that third reading.
Right.
That's right, nothing is done until it's done. Question in the back,
Who decides which committee it goes to?
The speaker.
the speaker.
Is he in favor of this?
The speaker has never gone on the record.
But he kind of decides, because he tells the chairman, let this out of committee or don't let it out of committee.
Well, our bill got out of committee last time and it got and we had time, so if that's an indication, I think it's not big enough for him to spend a whole lot of time on it. I mean, there's 7,000 bills.
The other thing is that if he's gonna pick something to retaliate against, say, Brian Hughes, who's the bill author or whatever, it's not gonna be this. It's not gonna be something where he has a majority of both Republicans and Democrats in the House on his bill. and he spice them. You know, he's not gonna, it's not gonna be something where he sets a political opponent up, you
To be
know,
a
with an
hero.
issue, you know, down the line.
Because it would cost him too much support.
That's right. I mean, this is a bill where some of his, you know, leadership in other areas had signed on to it and supported it. And so, it just seems like this is probably